January 15th, 1947. A woman was walking with her young child through a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood when something in an empty lot caught her eye. At first, she thought it was a broken mannequin, but when she stepped closer, she realized it wasn't plastic. It was a human body, perfectly arranged in the grass, cut in half, drained of blood, and posed. The victim would soon be identified as Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old woman chasing a better life in Hollywood. But what investigators uncovered next would turn this case into one of the most disturbing and mysterious murders in American history. Because despite hundreds of suspects and decades of investigation, the killer known as the Black Dahlia Avenger was never found. Let's tear into it. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924, in Boston, Massachusetts. She was the third of 5 daughters in a struggling working-class family. But Elizabeth's childhood took a strange turn during the Great Depression. In 1930, with her father's car was discovered abandoned on a bridge over the Charles River. Authorities assumed the worst. They believed he had taken his own life, leaving Elizabeth's mother alone to raise 5 daughters. But years later, the truth emerged. Her father hadn't died. He had simply disappeared and started a new life in California. When Elizabeth was 18, she moved west to reconnect with him. But the reunion didn't last long. They argued constantly. Within weeks, Elizabeth left home. From that point forward, her life became unstable. She moved between cities, between friends, between temporary jobs. But she had one dream that kept pulling her back to Los Angeles: Hollywood. Elizabeth Short wasn't a movie star, but she desperately wanted to be one. Friends described her as striking, pale skin, dark hair, and a quiet confidence. She often dressed entirely in black, which some people believe later inspired the nickname she would become famous for. But the truth was far less glamorous than the legend. Elizabeth worked odd jobs, waitressing, clerical work, occasional modeling attempts. She spent time around Hollywood Boulevard, where aspiring actors, soldiers, and drifters all mixed together in post-war Los Angeles. Some friends said she loved attention. Others said she was simply trying to survive. But one thing about Elizabeth became clear to the people who knew her. She moved constantly, from couch to couch, from city to city, always chasing opportunity, always hoping the next stop would finally be the one. In January of 1947, Elizabeth had just returned to Los Angeles after a short trip to San Diego. She had traveled with a man named Robert "Red" Manley, a married salesman she had been casually dating. On January 9th, Manley drove her to downtown Los Angeles. He dropped her off outside the Biltmore Hotel. Elizabeth told him she planned to meet her sister later that afternoon. Several witnesses later reported seeing her in the hotel lobby using a phone. After that, her trail disappears. Some people believe they saw her later that evening at a nearby cocktail lounge, but none of the sightings could be confirmed. For 6 days, Elizabeth Short simply vanished. No one knew where she went, who she met, or what happened to her. Then came the morning of January 15th. In the quiet neighborhood of Leimert Park, a woman named Betty Bersinger was walking with her daughter. As they passed a vacant lot, she noticed something pale lying in the grass. At first glance, it looked like a mannequin discarded on the roadside. But when she looked closer, she saw something horrifying. The body had been severed in half at the waist. The 2 halves were placed about a foot apart. Her arms were raised above her head, her legs spread apart. Investigators immediately noticed something chilling. The body had been carefully cleaned. There was almost no blood at the scene, which meant Elizabeth had been killed somewhere else and then transported to the lot. The killer had even arranged the body deliberately, as if displaying it. The autopsy revealed details that stunned investigators. Elizabeth had suffered severe blows to the head. Those injuries likely caused her death. But what happened after that raised even more disturbing questions. Her body had been cut in half with surgical precision. The incision was made between specific vertebrae in the spine, a method known as hemicorporectomy, a rare surgical technique taught in medical schools decades earlier. Whoever did this had anatomical knowledge, possibly a surgeon, possibly a medical student, or someone with experience working around human bodies. Investigators also discovered ligature marks on her wrists and ankles, suggesting she had been restrained. But despite early rumors printed in newspapers, there was no evidence that she had been tortured for hours. In fact, many of the most shocking details about the case were later revealed to be media exaggerations. But the reality was already horrifying enough. Within days, the case exploded across national headlines. Newspapers competed aggressively for details, and some reporters went far beyond ethical boundaries. When journalists located Elizabeth's mother in Boston, they didn't immediately tell her the truth. Instead, one reporter called and falsely told her that Elizabeth had won a beauty contest. He asked questions about her daughter's life, her childhood, her personality. Only after collecting the information did the reporter reveal the truth. Her daughter had been murdered. The newspapers also gave Elizabeth a name that would follow her forever: the Black Dahlia, a reference to her dark clothing and the popular film The Blue Dahlia, which had been released the year before. The nickname stuck, and soon the story became a media spectacle. Then something even stranger happened. Several newspapers received letters. They appeared to be written by Elizabeth's killer. One envelope contained items believed to belong to her, including personal belongings that had been cleaned with gasoline. Inside one message, the writer signed a chilling name: the Black Dahlia Avenger. Another letter promised the killer would turn himself in. Police even waited at the designated location, but the person never appeared. Instead, another message arrived shortly afterward. It simply said, "I changed my mind." Investigators were never able to confirm whether the letters were authentic. Some may have been hoaxes, but the possibility that the killer was communicating with the press added another layer of fear. Over the course of the investigation, police examined more than 150 suspects: doctors, actors, soldiers, even police officers. Some individuals confessed to the crime, but investigators quickly determined that most of them were lying. False confessions became a constant problem. People wanted attention. Others were mentally unstable. Some simply wanted to insert themselves into the most famous murder investigation in the country. But none of the suspects could be conclusively tied to the crime. Over the decades, countless theories have emerged. Some believe the killer was a surgeon. Others suspect a mortician or medical student. A few researchers have accused specific individuals. One of the most controversial theories came from a former detective who believed his own father was responsible. But even that claim has never been proven. And every new theory eventually runs into the same problem. There is simply not enough evidence. The truth is that investigators never found the crime scene. They never identified a weapon, and they never discovered the person who last saw Elizabeth Short alive. By the spring of 1947, the case had gone cold. Despite intense media attention, despite hundreds of interviews, despite one of the largest investigations in Los Angeles history, the murder of Elizabeth Short remained unsolved. More than 70 years later, the Black Dahlia case still fascinates investigators, historians, and true crime audiences around the world. Because the mystery isn't just about how she died. It's about everything we still don't know. Where she went during her final days, who she trusted, and who ultimately ended her life. Elizabeth Short came to Los Angeles chasing the dream of Hollywood. But instead, She became part of one of the darkest legends in American crime history. And somewhere out there, the truth about what happened to the Black Dahlia may still be waiting to be discovered. Thanks for watching.